It's tragic, really.
Shirley, are you here?
We all have a story.
We are contacting 911 for you.
A dark secret wrapped in emptiness and regret.
Quite frankly, I'm glad I did it.
You know.
They took her life.
They just can't prove it.
The toll. I'm Nancy Simpson. As the lieutenant dug through the file pertaining to Shirley Jane Rose, he finds a note that says her grave was 3.5 feet long, 18 inches wide, and 18 inches deep. I did not go out there. The property is closed off and there's a gate. We mapped it, and I got to see the general area. North side of McDaniel Lake, Old Highway 13 to Farm Road 76, West End, 18 feet east of the CU line, west of the property line, 10 feet south of the northwest ridge of the creek bed. Summed up, in a wooded area near a creek bed at the base of a clump of trees.
One of the witnesses, one of the guys that found her, actually saw a rib cage out of the ground, so she was decomposed pretty well.
Lieutenant Wilson there. When I go back to what Jack was saying, the officer who took the pictures of her body, he talks about the state of decomposition, that it didn't appear advanced. I went back to check that out. Now, he says twice that her body was fully clothed, so intact and fully clothed. No advanced state of decomposition that he saw, is what he said. And from his vantage point, I believe that was true to him. At the time of her disappearance, Chuck Rose, Shirley's father, lives in Nebraska. He says he hasn't seen Shirley Jane in nearly 3 years. Christy, the cousin, says her mom went to Nebraska to get the family and bring them to Springfield, hoping for a better go at things. Chuck is a quick suspect, but is also cleared very quickly. He was in Nebraska, home, at the time of her disappearance. He says Joyce called him late that night, Friday, and said Shirley Jane had been kidnapped, or at least picked up. His words. He loaded up and headed to Springfield. He's talking to a newspaper reporter. He's been at the police station while Joyce is being given a polygraph. Says they want to make sure she's not covering something up. Joyce took the polygraph. I don't know the result. She told the local paper police were afraid that she had hit Shirley Jane a little too hard. A scenario like that. She says she understands why Detective Bill Lloyd asked for the test. She calls him a pretty decent guy. She says, quote, I know he's done everything he could, but there just ain't a whole lot to go on. If I was crazy enough to pick up a child, I would make sure there weren't any other cars around. End quote. Fast forward. Winter. Joyce says she tries to keep busy. Goes Christmas shopping, but then will spot something like a dress that Shirley Jane would have loved, and it's over. Joyce says Joe, Shirley's brother, is okay at times, but other times she finds him upstairs crying. He's 13. She says they take him out and play some football, trying to get his mind off of it. Joyce says Shirley Jane was starting to come out of her shyness, but insists the girl would never have gotten into a car with someone she didn't know, unless she was forced. That's what she tells the paper. Joycey, the 16-year-old sister, says she's trying not to think about it. Her mom describes her oldest daughter as the mature one out of the group. Her mom also says this one has been the least able to adjust. Joyce tells the paper that all the others have gone back to school after the first few days, said what they needed to say to the other kids in class, and then moved ahead. Not Joycey. Her mom says she's not able to cope with it. 16. It's got to be tough. The Parkview High School sophomore has only been to school a few days total since Shirley Jane's disappearance. Joyce, the mom, is quoted as saying, I can't seem to get her to go back. She says she's going back tomorrow, but I heard that last Monday too. She goes back and says she wonders what she's doing there. End quote. This is the same high school Joyce attended when she was a teenager. The mom dropped out in the 11th grade, says she couldn't get along with the dean of girls. According to the paper, there's also a foster daughter living with this family. Her name is Mary Ann Andres. When I asked Shirley's cousin about this, her family couldn't recall this person. In the paper, it says this girl is a senior, expected to graduate in the spring, help support the family with a check from the state, which is turned over to her guardian, Joyce Rose. Single mom, 5 kids, and given custody of a teenager? I don't know. A question for the oldest sister for sure. Christy talks to me about her time with her Aunt Joyce.
Well, she was always my favorite aunt because she always showered me with attention and affection, and she thought I was this wonderful child that she wanted at her house all the time. Even though she had 5 kids of her own, she wanted me over there all the time. So, I guess she loved me a lot. She was a single parent in a time that it was very difficult to be a single parent. It's not easy to be one now, but back then it was really difficult. I know that there were rumors that she sold pot. I don't know if that's true. I know there were rumors that she did. As a kid being over there, I don't recall ever seeing that. But the story was that, she did this to make money to feed her family. It wasn't like she was like a hardcore drug dealer, just a single mom trying to make ends meet in a time where it wasn't easy to be a single mom. That's part of the rumor mill, and I don't know if that's fact or rumor, or if it's rumor that's just been repeated so much that people kind of just think of it as fact now. And it may be fact. That was speculation as to why this may or may not have happened. Was perhaps this was some kind of payback for drug money owed or something to that effect.
Jay Lashley works across the hall from me, a top 40 station called Power 96.5. He popped his head into the newsroom one day and said, "You should do a true crime podcast."
So I've loved podcasts. I feel like I was an early adopter. I've been listening to them for a really long time. Always thought, that's something I could do. Then Making of a Murderer came out. Me and you talked about it, and it was just like, oh, Nancy is super into this stuff. We talked about our love of Dateline and 48 Hours, and I was like, oh, wow, we have this thing in common. So I was just thinking I should do a true crime podcast. And then when I got down to really thinking about how am I going to go about this, I realized I have no clue. I have no clue how to investigate something. No clue. But I know somebody who I think would be really good at this, and her name is Nancy Simpson. And so I started bugging you about it.
You did. You'd open the door and you'd be like, "Hey, you want to do a true crime podcast? I'd help you." I'd be like, "God, I don't have time for that." About 2 weeks later, "Hey, I'm really serious. If you want to do a true crime podcast, I would help you. I would produce it." So yeah, you just kept doing that. And eventually I was like, okay, like if I did that, what would I pick? And so then I started going through crimes in the Ozarks and stories that have really affected me, and murders that are just unsolved for years and years and years. And we have so many here in the Ozarks. And so I mulled on that for a while. And finally I was like, okay, I got one. It was a whole months long process. Just that little part was so long just to pick out what we were going to do.
No, it was. And this is one of the first times in my life that things have gone down like this. I'm usually a solo worker. If I don't know how to do it, I learn it and I work alone. But this is one of the first times where I was just like, I do not have a clue what it takes to do something like this. And you were literally like the perfect person, the one person I could think of that could do it, happened to be right across the hall from me. And it was just like, once I found out you were into stuff like this, it was like, we have to do this.
Well, at one point you were like, I don't know, I just go and, ask some questions and stuff. Just open the mic and start talking. And I was like, what? No, you have to have like a plan and some kind of script and a place to go. And you were like, oh, see, that's the stuff I'd never think of. I'm like, a script and a plan is something you would never think of. I was laughing. I was like, you're like, now that you say that, I have no idea what I would do with this. No, I really wouldn't.
Yeah,
So-
the fact that I wouldn't have even thought to make a script, that you blew my mind with that. I was like, oh, that's how you plan out an episode. You don't just start talking and then 44 minutes later just be like, all right, we've got some gold.
Yeah, no, it makes me really nervous. This wasn't our first story choice, but that didn't matter. It's like Shirley took the reins and led me here. After the initial wave of stories and her body being discovered, there are no new real leads and no big articles I could find on this case until April 1982. Flashing forward, Shirley Jane's murder is now 7 years old. There's a judge who stirs things up, a sinister message to the killer and anyone who may have played a role in the little girl's death. Greene County Associate Circuit Judge Don Clough. So the story goes, when he was an attorney back in 1975, he had a client who says he knew who murdered Shirley Jane Rose and could give specific details about her last minutes on Earth. He says his client wanted and started to go to police a couple of times, but backed out. Attorney-client privilege, so Clough couldn't say anything. Now it's 1982, and now Judge Clough says this former client is sick and getting ready to die. The client is still too afraid to talk to police, but says, through the judge, that he's written a letter outlining all of the details to be released when he dies. The judge, in an apparent attempt to shake out the killers, writes an open letter and sends it to the media. It's tough, not gonna lie. The first time I read it, with the connection I feel to this story, it really hit me hard. It's sickening. Judge Clough, he's still alive. Moved to Florida, in his 80s, retired, travels. I tried a few times to get him to speak with me, messages and a letter relayed through his family. His son is an attorney here in town. His daughter-in-law told me the retired judge wouldn't be contacting me. Said he's over it. He's moved on and has a different life now. Okay. I reached out to his son just to make sure he didn't have something to say, to add to the story. Nope. Now, I don't know how Judge Clough sounds or how he sounded back in 1982, but what I did find was a coworker with the deepest voice in our building, Austin, and asked him to read this letter and sound ominous. And with him being a daddy, I warned him, this is a tough read.
I am personally going to see that you are sent to the gas chamber. I'm going to be present when they strap you in, and it's going to be the happiest day of my life, so that you know that I know exactly the way things happened. I'm going to tell you about the last minutes of Shirley Jane Rose's life. Shirley was taken to McDaniel Lake. She was told she would be killed. She was made to stand there and watch her grave being dug. She was crying. When the grave was ready, you took your bare hands and strangled her. You were not alone. There were a number of other people with you. Unfortunately for Shirley, the search for her came about so fast that you panicked and killed her.
Yeah, see what I mean? Tough to listen to. Clough tells the paper right after he released the letter, he received 20 calls at home that very night, and more poured in when he got to work. He tells the paper he's not expecting miracles here, but does believe he'll have something concrete in the next couple of days. I walked Shirley Jane's path. Now, I know roads can be hard to follow here, but we have maps that can help you, give you a better understanding as you go on this journey with me. You can find them all at thetollpodcast.com.
So Shirley Jane was playing with her cousin here at the grandparents' house. This is at the corner of West and Lombard. From what I'm told, they just finished up dinner and she left for her house, which is 5 blocks away. Seemed like really what was on her mind was to go home, ask her mom if she could head back over and spend the night at Grandma's with her cousin Christy and just grab a few things. It's a small house, white house. Pretty much the same, I'm told. It has a carport, some bird feeders, fence. Okay, let's go down Lombard. So Shirley Jane, as told in the newspapers, left through the back gate here from this fenced yard. And remember, this is more than 4 decades ago. She went up Lombard here. I'm gonna walk it. Wonder how much different it looks. Big trees in the neighborhood. 40 years ago, they were a lot smaller, right? She was 9, probably not paying that much attention. Walking home, like she'd probably done a million times. Hey, kitty. I'm now at Lombard and Clifton, so let me tell you about Clifton. In the papers in 1975, her grandma says Shirley Jane often turned here and then went up to that next main street. Her mom says that Shirley Jane would usually stay on this street, on Lombard, and not turn left on Clifton. So you have a 9-year-old girl. If she went down Clifton, it would take her onto Grand, which is, well, it would keep her off Scenic longer, which is the main street. So that would be one advantage to cutting over here. But other than that, there really isn't one. Lady Cricket is a bloodhound, and she was brought in to retrace Shirley Jane's steps. And she turns left here on Clifton. But witnesses along the way tell a different story. So, I'm going to go forward here to the main road. But just know this is where the bloodhound says, yes, Shirley Jane turned left here on Clifton. That's what the bloodhound says. But again, I have witnesses that say she went straight.
In the coming days, another witness comes forward, names a suspect. That witness takes a polygraph. Detective Bob Humphrey is quoted as saying that the information is not startling and that this guy provided no new information. The polygraph results were conclusive, but not helpful. Clough says many tipsters refuse to talk in person or be identified. Detective Humphrey says police have actually not talked to the judge at this point about any developments in the case, but would consider it if witnesses could be verified and, well, even simply identified. He says he doesn't want to fight with the judge. If this helps, great. But he doesn't know what the judge's motivations are, adding, they may be honorable. At this point, Greene County Associate Circuit Judge Don Clough says, as a judge, he's prohibited from commenting on a pending case and wants to avoid the appearance of impropriety. He says he will not be making any more public statements concerning this case. It looks like Shirley Jane's mom, Joyce, is back in the area now. She says she has mixed feelings about the judge trying to crack the case, catch a killer. She tells the paper she had a meeting with Clough and told him he had based his case on erroneous information, but adds it might work. Joyce's quote, if it was going to end, that's one thing. But to go through this publicly every year to 6 months and accomplish nothing, it's just painful. I'm not stupid. This case was the most sensational thing that happened in Springfield almost forever. To have Clough stir things up all over again with so many people being hurt by it and not have nothing, it just makes me furious. But someone may come forward, and it might work.
The mom's even saying, like, why are you doing this to us? But she even says it might work because he's just trying to trick people. He's saying, like, well, I know already. You better come forward now. Here's your window. If you don't come forward now, it's going to get way worse for you. I'm going to strap you in the gas chamber myself.
Sounds like during their meeting, though, he was saying that's the theory, you know, the drug connection with her that we'll get into later. But probably, you know, well, you took it because you owed some people some drugs or something, you know. And she's like, that's not right. But I didn't know this. I didn't know that whole, you know, crying and digging the grave. I don't know.
Right.
Clough declined to comment on the statement about the erroneous information. Shirley's cousin Christy says there were a lot of assumptions within the family that whoever took Shirley, she must have known them.
You know how it is whenever something bad like that happens, you tend to like kind of pull everybody close to home for a while and are overprotective for a little while. Especially in that time between her disappearing and them finding her. But I don't remember going to Aunt Joyce's anymore after that, though.
Were you allowed to play outside and all that stuff still?
Yeah. Yeah, but she wasn't kidnapped from Granny and Grandpa's. You know, she was kidnapped somewhere between. I think there was a news article about some people had seen her kind of walk the back way. So I think there was some witnesses that might have seen her just before she was taken. And a lot of the assumptions were that whoever took her, she must have known them because everybody in the family was just certain she wouldn't have gotten in a car with a stranger.
Christy says she's never really talked about Shirley's death with other aunts or uncles, other family members.
Yeah, that's true. I've never really talked a lot about this with anybody other than my mom. And I think my mom mostly knows, just like me, the rumors. My cousin Joyce, the oldest child, she was a teenager when all this happened. I'm sure she has much stronger memories of it because she was, you know, grown. And if that was going on in her house, if her mom was selling, you know, marijuana, I would say there's a good chance that she knew about that or at least would have been somewhat aware of it. I mean, I don't know, unless my Joyce was really good at hiding it, which is also possible, but I don't think it was something that my parents were aware of until after all this happened, because I don't think my parents would have let me go over there if they thought that's what she was doing in that house.
That's a good point. So even with all the rumors, it's not like within your family they were like, oh yeah, I mean, I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, and at the time, I think this was all stuff that became knowledge, at least to my mom and probably Granny and Grandpa, after Shirley's disappearance. I think this was information that came out after, at least to to, like I said, to my mom.
So we are at Scenic, which is the main road. We just went up Lombard, the street that Shirley Jane started her journey on. Okay, looks clear. I'm gonna cross. Get across, get across. I'm at Scenic and Lombard, and that's where we find our first witness. It's October, 6:30-ish or so, so it is dusk. All right, so this guy says he saw a girl matching Shirley Jane's description, and a man between 25 and 32 in a blue 1970s Chevrolet car with a dent in the rear fender. And the guy says this car was pulling up beside her. The witness says when the driver noticed that he was being watched, he took off. So an all points lookout is later put out for this car. That's where that comes from, that first report. So this is a straight shot up the road where she started her walk. And I have a witness who says her family actually waved at Shirley Jane and watched her cut across on the street that was close to the grandma's house. And that's the path the bloodhound hit on. Now, if I go back and take that path, then that eliminates this intersection right here, right where a witness says he saw a blue Chevy pulling up next to a girl dressed in white. And I think that's an important detail. If she turned down where the bloodhound tracked her, then we completely eliminate this intersection where a witness says he saw Shirley Jane and made eye contact with a man who was driving a blue car that appeared to be following her. I think that's important. The papers say this witness went into a nearby market, and as he returned going back down this road, he saw the car again following her on Scenic and Grand. So we're going to go down to Scenic and Grand. There is no sidewalk or shoulder or anything here, so I'm going to walk in the grass. So let's think about that. You'd have to be going this way. If a car's following her, it would have to be going this way. That would make sense, but she would have to walk in the grass a little bit. Because if she was walking on the street, she was walking on the street. There is no curb, no shoulder, no space at all to walk on the road. She would be walking in the road. And at this point, he says that the girl is shaking her head and waving, and not in a nice way, like a negative way. Maybe the speculation is she's been offered a ride and she doesn't want one, so she's kind of shaking her head that way. So that's at Scenic and Grand. And no matter which way we took, we would get to this intersection right here.
The prosecutor's office takes a leap, jumps in with an offer of immunity and protection for the judge's former client and that man's family in exchange for what this man claims is everything you'll ever need to know about Shirley Jane's murder. The Greene County Chief Assistant Prosecutor is quick to add, as long as this guy didn't take part in any way. He also says fair consideration would be given to any other witnesses for their cooperation. By the next month, police say no new information has been gleaned as a result of this sensational open letter to the killer, and the former client didn't bite on protection for him and his family, and he never came forward. Springfield Police Detective David Asher tells the paper this information the judge had was the same information they had in 1975 during the initial investigation. He wants the witness who is dying to come forward and tell his story. All of it. I found Asher. He lives in Arkansas. He's in his 70s and his health has been a challenge. He didn't have a lot to add and told me he did not remember the judge's letter. Same when I found the prosecutor from that time, David Giesler. The case didn't exactly cross his desk. No charges were filed, so not much to add. But he didn't remember the judge's letter either. It just seems so emotionally charged, right? Sensational. I sent him a text making sure I had asked him about the letter, and he sent back, "Nancy, you did ask me, and I have no knowledge of such letter." Okay, both of these men are in the paper talking about this letter, or at least asked questions and say it brought no new information to light. I'm in no way saying these men do remember the letter and they're just not telling me. They've both had long careers, many, many cases, and we're reaching back 4 decades. Again, my producer Jay weighs in.
The reason that I think you can feel confident of some of this stuff is this detail is so sensational that if it ever had any water, it would have stuck out in people's minds. Just human nature would make it pass around. I mean, I remember when you just told me about the letter, I was like, whoa. That makes it sound way crazier than just a girl gets taken off a road. I mean, that's what it does, is really adds this watching people dig her own grave.
This inhumane level.
Yes. I mean, the reason that there's first degree murder and there's capital murder and all these things is it goes to motive. Everybody's gotten enraged and seen red. I don't think I'd kill a person, but can you you can go there where you think, okay, you get worked up, standing there and like torturing to make them watch you dig a grave. And then you've got just dudes standing around watching for, I guess, the fun of it. I mean, that just sounds really, really, really evil. It doesn't sound like a crime of opportunity at all.
I have asked many people involved in this case if they remember the judge's letter, and they don't. What they do tell me is this little girl had to watch her grave being dug, crying, strangled, drug deal gone bad. They know the sensational story, like Jay was saying, but they don't know the source. I do.
A friend of the family is driving a bread truck. He says he also saw Shirley Jane at this intersection here at Scenic and Grand, right here. He says he did not notice anyone following her. So same intersection, two different stories. Let me cross here. Okay. I'm on Scenic, crossing Grand. I'm going to have to get in the grass. There are sidewalks on the other side of the street. Again, none where I'm walking. And I would think if she's walking home and a car is pulling up next to her, the car would have to be going this way. So let's talk about Teresa Kilborn. She is 11, and she lives at 1149 South Scenic, so just south of here. So I'm going to continue on this path. In an interview with the local paper, it says Teresa is one of the few kids in the neighborhood around Shirley Jane's age and one of her few friends in the area. So according to the papers, we'll walk on here, Teresa had just gotten back from scout camp. She said she wasn't feeling well and she was in the house with her mom when her dad heads out the north side of the house and headed toward his parents' house. Sounds like they lived really close. He's walking toward the main road. That's going to be Scenic, somewhere between 6:30 and 7. And he says he does not see Shirley Jane there on that main road. A few minutes later, Teresa and her mom head out that same door. And Teresa says she did see Shirley Jane standing on this main road and tells the reporter that she did not see a car following her friend. She says Shirley Jane stared at her. It appeared that Shirley Jane realized they were leaving, and so she didn't stop. She just kind of continued south on Scenic toward her home. It's quite the walk when you have to navigate ditches and walnuts. Okay, ground's a little soft too. This was a driveway right here, you can tell. Used to be a driveway. Yep, right across from there. Okay, so here we are. This is where I believe Teresa's family would have been. No house, that's all gone. This is like storage, got all kinds of plastic pipes and whistles and stuff in here. Yeah, but you can tell this is probably where the driveway is, and when I mapped it out, it was right here across from that apartment building. So, yeah, this would have been the driveway. Huh. So this is the same area where Lady Cricket, the bloodhound, would later indicate that this spot is where Shirley Jane's trail actually went cold. Right here is where the dog would sniff to the middle of the driveway, throw her head up, and then begin circling around. Handlers would explain that this is the bloodhound's way of saying the trail had stopped cold. Take a picture. And when I mapped it out on Google Maps, I was like, I think it's right here, but I mean, clearly, when you get here, this used to be a driveway. If you take that story in isolation, one moment, Teresa sees Shirley Jane, and then 3-4 seconds later, somebody throws her in a car, walking a few steps. We're just talking a few seconds. Where did the car come from?
In 1982, the former prosecutor says a push by his office has resulted in some new information about the primary suspect, but still not enough for any charges. Is that Steve Fletcher? I don't know. By late that summer, a twist. Greene County Associate Circuit Judge Don Clough says he will comply with the Disciplinary Commission's order that he will not write any more letters similar to the one about the killer. The Missouri Commission on the Retirement, Removal, and Discipline of Judges. Deep breath. Important panel with a big name. Anyway, that group found probable cause to believe that Clough's letter created the appearance of impropriety. And he agreed. That did away with any formal hearing. To the paper, Judge Clough says he regrets that his strong desire to have the Rose case solved caused the appearance of impropriety. The definition, acting in an inappropriate manner. Another definition, behavior that is dishonest or socially unacceptable. That's for producer Jay. What does that mean? So there you go.
That ties it all up right there.
That's your red bow.
For sure. He just did it to get his name, the Kanye West thing. Who cares what they're saying? Just get my name in their mouth. That's a motive right there to drop suspect information that's sensational, For me, that does it. Here's the thing, though. That doesn't mean he didn't believe it.
It doesn't.
Yeah, he totally could have believed it. I believe that is totally possible. So if he fully believed it, then it's not wrong in the same way. You know?
And police have heard it. I don't know that they discredited the whole thing.
Right.
They've heard the story. Obviously, they've investigated.
Mm-hmm.
But whether they believed or they found people to corroborate that, I don't have access to police files.
Clough says he probably should have held off until after November, the election. The investigator from Seattle, Cloyd Steiger, says this whole judge story, to him, bogus.
I saw some stuff in the articles about this case that, didn't pass the smell test for me when I read them. The article about the judge who supposedly knew somebody who knew something about it. And I'm not saying that the judge didn't get this information, but with the information he got didn't pass the smell test for me. There was a plan to kidnap this kid for ransom for drug money. No. First of all, kidnapping for ransom don't happen, and there'd be no reason to take something that a case that would be potentially, a drug case and make it a potential death penalty case. I mean, it's stupid. The dramatic, I told her I was going to kill her and dug a grave. That may be true, but I doubt it. This person, whoever did this, probably sexually molested this little girl, and that was the motivation for kidnapping her. It wasn't to hold her ransom. I don't even know this family had any money to pay a ransom. They weren't a pair of well-to-do or famously rich family. But it could be somebody she knew. It probably was somebody she knew. That's why he killed her, because she could identify him. Or if he's just a real sick psychopath that sexually gets excited by killing children, and there are those people. But I don't believe a second of that, just based on what I know of the probabilities. It's Occam's razor. The simplest solution is almost always the correct one. And when you always get these wild stories and rumors going around in cases like this, and, it was a satanic cult, it was this, it was that. No, it never is. It's something stupid, some sexual psychopath attracted to children, maybe attracted to her specifically prior to this, or maybe he just saw her on the street and he kidnapped her and killed her. That's what this is about. It's a tragic story. It doesn't make it any more tragic, but it doesn't have to be that dramatic. That the rumors on the street make them sound to be. They almost always way overstate the facts of the case.
Joyce, Shirley's mom, tells the paper this letter was particularly upsetting because she had never heard the details of what some say were Shirley's final moments. Here's Joyce's quote, "I hardly know what to say. I hope this brings an end. It may possibly bring results. I just don't know if it will ever end or not. I would like to see it end. I just got to the point where there isn't anything we can do for Shirley. She's gone. But I have 4 other children."
That is not something I would say. That is something my mother would say. That is not something I would say.
Yeah. I mean, Joyce doesn't come out looking like Mother of the Year for sure. She doesn't really look guilty, but, yeah, I have 4 more kids. Kind of crazy, actually.
But then I'm judging a mom through her grief, and that is simply not fair.
Here we are at the driveway police will say she was likely picked up at. As I look south, there's a big tree, but there's her house. Her home. Did she make it home? Some say she's still there.
Next time on The Toll.
Several weeks later, they said, "Hey, you want to see the videotape?"
Finally, I plugged my ears. I said, "You're scaring me. Stop. It's enough. I know you think so-and-so murdered that little girl, but he didn't do it." And I was like, "Okay, dude, I don't even know what you're talking about."
By the way, Nancy Simpson, we are contacting 911 for you to try to get help to that lady.
We want want to bring as much attention to this case as possible. Help us by sharing The Toll with your friends. The Toll podcast, The Path Back Home, is a production of The Toll, LLC. Co-creator and host, Nancy Simpson. Co-creator and executive producer, Jay Lashley. Technical producer and audio editor, Kat Morgan Gaines. Marketing manager, Pamela Shelby. Web design and digital creative director, Shelby Powers. Technical analyst for digital strategy, Christina Oswald. Special thanks to Eliza Blackwood, transcriptionist, and Austin Robertson, voiceover. Original theme by Jay Lashley. Additional music by FirstCom. Reproduction or use of any part of this podcast without the express permission of The Toll LLC is prohibited. Get updates at our website, thetollpodcast.com.